We're heading into that final weekend of the election campaign, and today the Conservative team added a last-minute stop to its Sunday plan, a rally in Pierre Poilievre's own riding just outside of Ottawa. Now, this comes after both the Globe and Mail and the Toronto Star reported that Poilievre may be in a close race to hold on to his seat in the riding of Carlton. Let's bring in our panel of veteran journalists. They're in Ottawa. Robert Fife. He wrote one of those stories. He is the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Globe and Mail. Mia Rabson is the Deputy Parliamentary Bureau Chief at the Canadian Press. And Joël-Denis Bellavance is the Parliamentary Bureau Chief for La Presse. It's good to see you all. Bob, let's start with you and that story that you had a hand in. And is this the Bob Fife decision desk declaring Bruce Fanjoy elected in Carlton? What are your sources telling you about the state of that race?
Well, I wouldn't put any money on it. Look, I think it'll be still... It would be an upset if Mr. Poilievre was to lose that riding. It's one he's held since 2004. But the fact of the matter is that the Conservatives over the last few weeks have felt it was necessary to send in campaign workers to campaign for him. It shows you how tight a race it is in that Carlton riding. For example, some of the workers that are going into Mr. Poilievre's riding would normally be going into Peterborough. There's a riding held by the Conservative MP, Michelle Ferrier, which apparently she's in deep trouble with the Liberals. And we know from polls that the Ontario Progressive Conservatives have taken just this week in Ottawa. The Liberals basically are going to clean up in this city. They're at, I think it's 53% to 31% for the Conservatives. And that means that Mr. Poilievre is going to be facing a real challenge in this riding. And the Liberals have done their own internal polls of about 381 for that riding, that's a good number for a riding like that. And they are, Mr. Poilievre is in a dead heat. So we'll see what happens at this. But let's face it, if he loses this riding and if he loses the election, boy, he's going to be in a lot of trouble with the party. Yeah. Given the tight control that he's managed over everybody, choking everybody into submission.
Yeah, Mia, I don't know if it'll get to the point of Carlton being lost, but it's interesting. New numbers from Elections Canada, 43,000 people voted in the advanced polls in Carlton, the most in any riding. And just you listen to what Bob's saying, it just shows how different this campaign has gone than what the Conservatives thought they were getting into when they spent a year and a half asking for an election ASAP.
The remarkable thing is that we were even having a discussion about whether Pierre Poilievre could lose his own riding. You know, he won that seat by 20 points in the last election. I want to say 15 almost in 2019. This shouldn't be a riding that they are at risk of losing. I mean, 3 months ago, everything was going to be a victory cruise for him. So the fact that we're even having this conversation today is just kind of shocking. I do think it's a sign of where this election is going, the turnaround, every sort of the topsy-turvy election that we're having. But yeah, I mean, even if it's close, he will have a lot of questions that he will have to provide answers for as to exactly how this could have happened. It should be an absolute safe seat for the Conservatives.
JD, it's interesting. Elections Canada has apparently obtained a special dispensation to allow them to start counting advance ballots 2 hours before the polls close on voting day. But in Carlton, because the longest ballot committee, there's 91 candidates running there, so they're going to start counting 6 hours earlier, because you can imagine if this is a tight race and 91 names, it could be like 3 o'clock in the morning before we have a result there, like with the by-elections where this happened.
And Mr. Poilievre will be anxious to know the results, whether he wins that riding or not. And that's another problem that is piling on for Mr. Poilievre. And usually when you're on a winning ascendancy, if I may say, you go on the offensive. And that just shows that if the Conservatives feel the need to send staff to help Mr. Poilievre win his riding, it means that they're really defending what they have, their assets. And that means that it's a bit sort of like conceding that the election will not turn in their way on Monday night when you have to defend the leader's riding like this. And to me, that's a bit a symptom of the campaign the Conservative had since the beginning. And I was telling my colleagues before we went on air how shocked I am still today that the Conservatives seemed so unprepared for this election while they were calling for one basically 2 years ago. and the number of candidates that was rejected, the kind of platform they came up with seems to me that this is not a platform that was written 2 years ago or was 2 years in the making. And lastly, that they were unable to switch message, pivot from their message throughout the campaign until they faced, some trouble in the polls. So that means that the Conservative Party, the way they ran their campaign, they were not prepared for this election, and surprisingly to me, because they were calling for one for the last 2 years.
Bob, I'm surprised by where the Conservatives are in the final days of this campaign. Look, they're going to stop in Saskatoon because they haven't been to Saskatchewan. They don't want to ignore the province. I don't think they feel they're in big trouble in Saskatchewan. But you got to beat down the doors of the 905 if you're going to win this thing. Instead, you're in Calgary, you're in Halifax, you're ending. I just thought we'd see Pierre Poilievre, all around Mississauga, Brampton, York region, Hamilton, really for days on end. What are your thoughts where they are?
Well, there's two things. One is I'm surprised he has to go into Calgary. Why do you have to go into Calgary? It should be a very safe area. So clearly they are concerned that they're going to lose some seats. Why would you go into Saskatoon? The Liberals have not won a seat in Saskatoon since 1993, but Mr. Carney has been in there, and obviously Mr. Poilievre feels he's got to go in there too, because they're obviously afraid that they're going to lose seats. And so when you see leaders having to go into their own ridings, that means they're trying to protect seats from the Liberals. But you're absolutely right. Ontario is where the votes. This is what's going to form a majority government, is Ontario, and they should be working that 905. They should be working the 519. Should be working the Peel area, and they really are not doing that. And I wonder it's because we know from the numbers from the Ontario Progressive Conservatives that the Liberals are about 10 to 15 points ahead of the Conservatives in Ontario, and I wonder if they're just at this point realizing that they're not going to be able to pick up those seats. So why waste your time?
Yeah, I mean, Mia, sometimes you and I have been on these planes in elections. Sometimes the stop is just what's close to the airport so you can do it efficiently. Where's the major media market so you can make sure the cameras are there, and it's about hitting the media as opposed to a specific riding. But what are your thoughts on the Conservatives not really zeroing in on what everyone kind of thinks is, I know the lower mainland of BC matters, but it is everything around Toronto.
I mean, BC is also, a battleground, and for the Conservatives, this campaign might be a battle of inches in some ridings, and so every riding that they can maintain or maybe try and pick up, especially from the NDP, there's some contests in BC typically that are NDP Conservative battles. I'm wondering if this decision isn't about that they're worried about Saskatchewan or Calgary per se, although there are certainly seats at risk to the Liberals in both of those cities right now. I wonder if he needs to go in and show that momentum. They were using these rallies for this entire campaign to show that they could bring out the crowds, and he needs that as to energize them for the last few days of this campaign. I mean, no doubt they will have a big crowd in Saskatoon. They will get a big crowd in Calgary, and I wonder if that is part of what is driving that decision, is that going into that final day, they can still show, look, we still can bring out the people, so don't worry, we're not out of this.
Yeah, they had a smaller rally sort of in the Vaughan area, around Toronto the other night. Now, I don't know, not going to suggest that's a sign of weakness because the Leafs were playing, in the playoffs. So, people had something they really wanted to watch. But just what's your thoughts on that? I mean, if the rally sizes do prove, this was the barometer of their strength by the party's own measurement, right? Early in the campaign. What if they don't deliver the big numbers in the stretch run? What does that tell us? Well,
if this was the election based on rallies, the Conservative Party would win it. But polls show another thing, that the Liberals are more popular. And there is one reason for that, as you know, David. It's because of the collapse of the NDP support. For the Conservative to be successful anywhere in Canada, at least in Ontario and even BC, the NDP has to be stronger than it is right now. And the fact that the NDP is so low does not help the Conservative Party. So I'm guessing that Sunday night they'll be praying for a resurrection of some sort of the NDP support so that they can win more seats in Ontario and in British Columbia. Yeah. And the problem is still the same also in Quebec in some measure. The NDP collapse is also a factor in Quebec, and with the Bloc Québécois support also bleeding support to the Liberal Party, that does not help the Conservative Party win more seats.
Okay, I want to jump in there for a second if I can, because I want to show you, we have seen a little bit of a rebound by the Bloc, if we can put up the polling graphic there, gang. They've been coming up a little bit, as I understand it, JD, you know, at about 26% now, though maybe a little bit more movement you're hearing from parties and with their internal numbers, you know, in the past 5-6 days. Well, what's your sense of that dynamic, JD, in Quebec? Do you think the Bloc is moving enough to mitigate seat losses and maybe keep the Liberals down under that 40 threshold they kind of need to hit if they want to win a majority?
The short answer to that question is no, because of the NDP collapse vote also in Quebec that is also going to the Liberal Party. So the Bloc Québécois cannot win many seats with 25% because it is spread out. And it is fighting the Liberals in the island of Montreal, in the suburbs mostly, and in the regions also. You know, they can lose some seats as well. So I'll give you the example of the seat of Diane Leboutillier, the Minister of Fisheries, former Minister of Fisheries.
In the Gaspé?
Yeah, in the Gaspé. She was about to be in a tough fight with Alexis Duchesne, the Bloc Québécois candidate, but apparently she's in good shape to win that riding. And if she wins that riding, that spells really bad news for the Bloc Québécois in the entire province, in my sense, because the last time there was a red wave, Diane Leboutillier won handily her riding, and if that's the case again in this fourth election, the Bloc Québécois will be in rough shape on Monday night.
Interesting. Well, and because of the Ile de Magdalene, we start to get the polling results a half an hour earlier there.
Exactly.
Sort of during the Atlantic window instead of the Quebec window on Monday night. So we'll get a bit of a preview of that. Okay, look, because we've got 3 journalists here, we want to show you what happened with one of our colleagues today in Halifax. This is Abigail Beeman, used to work with Global, now works with CTV, trying to get a comment from former Conservative Party President Rob Batherson, someone who's appeared on this show many times over the years, was a former communications director to former Premier John Hamm of Nova Scotia, a guy who knows the media world, the media game. Look what happened.
Sorry, guys, we are just going to hold here.
Mr. Batherson,
Thank you, guys.
don't push me, Riley.
Thank you, guys.
Mr. Batherson, can we chat with you for a minute? Mr. Batherson,
Thank you very much.
are you gesturing to us or to the party? Can we ask you a couple questions, Mr. Batherson, about the race in the Atlantic? Mr. Batherson, do you have any comments on Trump's
Thank
new
you very
comments
much,
about
folks.
Canada's sovereignty? Please don't push
Sorry,
me,
ma'am.
Riley.
We're
Please
just gonna
don't. You're
hold
literally
here.
pushing me. Please don't push me.
Thank you, ma'am.
Please don't push me. Mr. Batherson, do you have a minute for the cameras,
Just
please?
behind the flag.
Mr. Batherson, do you have any comments on Trump's new comments about Canada's sovereignty or the new auto threat since
Thank
we're
you very
standing
much,
in a car dealership?
Bob, I want to start with you if I can. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? If you don't want to answer questions, that's fine. You can walk away and do your things. Whoever Riley is, I don't know who Riley is, kind of deliberately getting in the way, you know, making contact with the reporter a couple of times to the point that Abigail had to say, don't push me. I mean, we saw similar things in Newfoundland when they were in Petty Harbour. I mean, what do you make of this?
Well, these are not isolated incidents. Our own report
Mr. Batherson.
Oh.
experiences. In fact, I was getting phone calls from the last couple of days. Just the way they were treated, they're put into these basically cages, and they're not allowed to go out and talk to the people who are showing up at rallies. And they always have a minder there to make sure that they're not allowed out. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous. And the fact of the matter is that the people in these rallies are quite fine to talk to reporters. There's not a problem with that. It's the controlling tactics of Mr. Poilievre and his team. And let's remember Jenny Byrne, who's the campaign manager, when they refused to let we're not going to let reporters have on a campaign plane. This was going to be the most transparent election in Canadian history. Well, it is with the other parties, but it certainly isn't with the Conservatives.
Well, yeah, I mean, this looks pretty transparent, but I don't think it's transparency. I mean, it feels to me that this doesn't help a campaign because you just don't get the fuller coverage of their candidates. You don't get the fuller coverage of their platform, their ideas.
Well,
and
it's anti-democratic as well. Let's face it. Election campaigns are an opportunity to test the leadership, to talk to people who show up at these rallies. What are their concerns? Our job as reporters is to talk to all these people and reflect that in our reporting. And they simply do not want that. They want to control the message so much that it just seems so self-defeating.
Yeah, Mia, what do you think on this? It was interesting, like no debates, very few interviews, though I did notice some of the candidates back in my home province, they did CBC debates, which I don't know if Central Campaign knew about that, but they happened. Your thoughts?
I mean, it's not new that Conservative candidates are not doing debates. We've seen this in multiple elections before, and clearly there's some message to them that they shouldn't do it. But that's not just taking it away from journalists being able to write about it. That's also taking it away from voters who might attend or watch some of those debates and get a chance to see the candidates side by side, hear what they have to say about local issues, hear from their local candidate. This campaign, and maybe not just from the Conservatives as well, this campaign is so much about the leaders and who is running, leading these parties. It's not even about the teams that might form around them in a cabinet. It is so much about Mr. Carney and Mr. Poilievre and what their vision is and what they will say about things. And that's really a disservice to voters and to MPs or the people running to be MPs.
Well, Mia, on that point, you can't punch through, right? You can't punch through, as a local candidate if you're not allowed to actually do earned media and talk to people and display yourself as anything other than a backdrop for the leader.
Well, and do you really want to be the line in a story that says the Conservative candidate couldn't be reached for comment, the Conservative candidate didn't attend a debate? That's not really the line that they should be wanting in these stories. But if that's the line they would prefer over trusting that their candidates could actually answer questions with intelligence, that doesn't suggest they have confidence in their candidates, and that's not a good message to send either.
So JD, how is this playing out in places like Quebec? I've heard Chantal Hébert talk about how someone like Gérard Deltel could be an excellent spokesperson for the Conservatives in Quebec, but just kind of low profile, not doing a lot of stuff. Everything is about the leader, and it all lives and dies with him.
Well, he's been disappeared from the map. I'm wondering if he's still running. We haven't heard from him since the election campaign started. It's a bit silly because you're running for office, but you're running away from answering questions. Democracy is about answering questions because you want to run the affairs of the nation. But if you don't have the courage to answer those questions, well, just stay home. That's my personal opinion. And we've seen that in Quebec a lot also. Candidates were invited over and over from the Conservative Party, but they all said no. And it's a sad story because, as you mentioned, Gérard Deltel is a very efficient communicator, very effective. He can sell the message, but he's not allowed to do it. So what does it leave Mr. Deltel to do? Just stay silent and not participate in any debates. And that's unfortunate because Mr. Deltel and many other Tory MPs in Quebec, they can sell the message, but they're not allowed to do it. So it's a bit silly season to me.
Yeah, David, I think there's going to be a reckoning after this election campaign if the Liberals win a majority. You've had not only the control, the way MPs and candidates have been treated like children, but there were 90 ridings that Jenny Byrne had kept to herself and selected people, and that has really gotten the craw of a lot of people who felt the Conservative Party should be grassroots. They should be nominating and electing people. It's the treatment of people like Doug Ford and Jean Charest and Mike DeYoung in British Columbia, people who could have been real assets for the Conservative Party. And then also where they had an opportunity, and we've all heard stories about high-profile and experienced former cabinet ministers who were prepared to run for the Conservative Party and were rejected. And now you cannot name, you wouldn't be able to name who would be the finance minister in a Poilievre government. It's been a one-man show. And I think at the end of this, when this campaign is over, and if they lose, I think there's going to be a lot of very unhappy Conservatives who are going to be voicing a lot of criticism about the leader and his campaign manager.
Well, Mia, on Bob's point, I had thought that Mike DeYoung might be the finance minister in a Carney government because he was the finance minister, in a Poilievre government. Bob planted that in my head. But, here we are. The purity test and the loyalty test got applied. And then the not dealing with the media thing. And look, I know people say this is all, you're making it about you and it's inside baseball. They're losing with boomers and people over 50. Guess who watches shows like this at critical mass? It's boomers and people over 50, of which I am one. So, Mia, it seems like you're cutting off an audience that you need.
Anytime you are taking away a chance to talk to voters is a bad thing. If you can't trust yourself or your candidates to get your message across, no matter who is asking that question or what the forum is, then probably should be second guessing whether you should be in politics, to be honest. It is not, politicians are supposed to talk to people. That is it's almost like a definition of part of the job. You talk to people, you listen to people, you respond to people. And so to see an election that is so heavily based on the leaders, we've been seeing this more and more and more, but to see it so heavily based around the leaders and not really about the team at all. The MPs do matter, and we're not seeing that in this election. But we already saw in the advanced polls last week, we saw a record turnout. There are people interested in voting in this election. I actually was saying earlier this week that I didn't think people would care that much about the platforms, that I didn't think people would want to know what was in the platforms. And the number of people that I've had tell me in the last couple of days that they were quite dismayed how late those platforms came because they wanted to see what was really on offer and be able to compare it. People want information. They want to hear from their leaders, and they're not hearing from them the way they want to.
And David, if I may...
10 seconds, JD.
If I may add to David, to Bob's point about credible candidates running for the Conservative Party, the finance minister of Quebec, Éric Girard, who ran for the Conservative Party in 2015, I believe, and lost, was ready to run again for the Conservative Party. He was ready to leave his position as finance minister in Quebec and run for the Conservative Party. He was told bluntly, "What have you done for me lately?" And the answer, he basically was told, "Take a hike. We don't want you." So that's the kind of...
I got to take a hike because Ian's going to take the network. Bob Fife, Mia Rabson, JD Bellavance, thank you so much.